I'm Sarah Silverman, and this is not funny.
How could fear be a gift? Well, it is.
These feelings are gifts. They're not things we should ignore.
The gift of fear is a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a PhD all rolled into one.
Sarah, one of the things that I am so glad to talk to you about is that you are, to me, a warrior, a real truth teller, and I wonder how you have this thing that so many women struggle with, which is the ability and the willingness to say things that you know will be unpopular with somebody, or you know will be shocking, because humor often is. Where did you get that?
In a way, it's something I think I've always had, and also in another way, I've learned it. I mean, when I think of the things that happened to me between 13 and 20, when I was polite and, I mean, I like to think I'm still polite, but when I didn't trust my gut or my instincts, and then I always think, why wouldn't that guy do that to me now? Boy, I wish he would do that to me now, because I would know how to react and I would be able to stop it or have some effect on what this person's doing to women. And I think the answer is predators have an instinct for people who they can be successful with or not successful with. And me, older me, is much less of a target for stuff like that, but younger, vulnerable me. I mean, the first penis I ever saw was when I was 18 and a cocktail waitress in New Hampshire. And one of the owners called me into his office. My heart was pounding. I thought I was in trouble. I mean, the full body terror of not knowing why I was being called into the boss's office, and him just sitting back at his desk chair and being very casual. "Oh, you having a good time here? You have people being nice to you?" And me answering him and not understanding why I'm being called in until I look down and see he is openly masturbating. That's the first penis I ever saw. And then to think about how I reacted, which was, I got a lump in my throat where I was about to burst into tears. And I said, "I've got to clean the popcorn machine." And I left and I never told anybody.
Right.
And I always think, like, if that happened to me now, I'd be like, "What are you doing?" And then I'd leave and I'd go, "This guy had his cock in his hand." Right. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that's the correct reaction
it's
or whatever,
perfect.
but
it's the authentic reaction, and it's good.
You know, that happens to vulnerable 18-year-olds or vulnerable any age, you know, but he pegged me as someone who, and he was right, who was gonna, you know, have the reaction that he was looking for and never tell us all.
Yeah, not get him in trouble.
Yeah.
And when did you get the ability to say no? Because I see you do it, and I see you be strong about it.
It took a few years. I moved to New York City from New Hampshire. I shared an apartment with two other girls. I was at the diner right around the corner, and I met this Jamaican older man. And he told me he gives great massages. And he said, "Where do you live?" And I said, "Right in this apartment building." And he said, "I'll give you a massage. Take me to your apartment." And I took him to my apartment.
Right.
I had a gut feeling and I was uncomfortable, but I didn't want to seem rude. I had white guilt about it, where I didn't want him to think I was racist by not taking a strange man to my apartment to give me a massage, which of course is absurd. And he convinced me to take my shirt off. He convinced me to take my bra off. And then he gave me a massage for a few minutes, and then he started grabbing at me. And my instinct was, I jumped up and I screamed and I told him to get out, and he did. And I mean, nothing, you know, happened, but anything could have happened.
Yeah.
And it all happened because I was afraid to be rude.
Right. That's a very big and common thing all throughout Western cultures. women are afraid to be rude. And
Yeah.
what was it, if you can think back, what was the fear? What would be caused by being rude?
That he would maybe, I thought of him as a grown up.
Mm,
I was scared he would get angry. I was scared he would not know that I am liberal and,
yeah.
I don't know.
When I think of you and I see you as this warrior out there in activism, in comedy, and it does not appear to me like you are held back by the fear of what someone will think about you today.
Well, I've found a great freedom. In some ways, it's very difficult because people always think I'm kidding.
Mm,
And in some ways, I get away with a lot. A guy he was staring at me from a place and I had a feeling. And then I could see him fumbling for his, phone. And I said, keep moving.
mm,
And he kind of laughed and he kept moving.
right,
People feel like they know me, like from camp. It's not like, oh, there's Nicole Kidman. Oh my God. It's like
right,
Sarah.
right.
And that's kind of a double-edged thing. It's lovely and it also can be scary. I've developed a full-on terror of drunk people because they can be very grabby. I actually don't drink. That doesn't agree with me.
Mm,
I'm a stoner, as you know, but still, even in that case, a immense lightweight. I just have a puff. I'm a teetotaler in general. But anyway,
mm,
especially men who are drunk and they want a picture, there's no asking,
mm.
having a response. It's just kind of grabbing and, my porcupine needles go up. And also I noticed with drunk people that all of their fears and insecurities get projected onto you. So I try to just get out of the situation
Mm.
immediately. At a party, as soon as the first wave of drunk people, I'm out of there because they'll look at you, and if you look at them in any way that they can interpret as disapproving of them or that you think X, Y, or Z about them, which is everything they're worried or feel
Sure.
about themselves. So I don't want to be a mirror for your insecurities. I don't want any trouble,
Yeah.
Men are bigger. They can kill me. And so I've developed a healthy fear, I think. But that healthy
Well,
fear makes you a little bit fearless in that you're willing to protect yourself. And
willing to take
you
the
know,
steps that are necessary.
there's a
Yeah.
time where if a guy said, oh, give me your phone number, I would be too embarrassed to not.
Right.
Now I go, I don't do that,
Right.
and they understand. I'm able to be actually rude, maybe even, where I just go like, beat it.
In my whole career, I've never seen any violent incident occur because a woman was rude to someone. But I have seen many, many, many occur because a woman allowed somebody to still stay in her environment that she didn't want to be around because of all those fears. The fear of being rude, the fear of being a bitch or seen to be a bitch, the fear of saying no, all of those.
Isn't that the classic is, hey, can I walk with you? Ignore, ignore. Fucking bitch.
Yeah, that's
okay.
right. That is the
What
classic.
you'd want your sister to do?
Yeah. So you talked a minute ago about things that happened between 13 and 18, and it doesn't sound like easy stuff.
I've had a couple times where I've been overpowered physically, and there's no scarier feeling than that. When I was 13, I don't know how to categorize this. My sister was at summer school at Berkeley, and I went to visit her, and she was busy in classes all day. And the guy who was in the dorm room next to her would hang out with me all day. And he was probably on acid most of the time, and I had no idea, but he seemed harmless. But one day I went over there to hang out with him, and he had a kind of crazed look on his face, and he grabbed my tiny body. I was very small for my age at 13. And he held me out a window, a 17-story window by my ankles until I screamed enough for him.
You're right. There's no easy place to categorize that, except it is domination. It is complete control of another person. It is done to cause dread and terror. So it's a very disturbing, you know better than I, a very disturbing thing.
And again, I don't remember going home and telling my parents or anything.
The question I would have for really your parents, not for you, but is it okay for you to be alone in an environment with anybody that old at 13 years old?
The things I did on my own at a time where there were no cell phones, it is bananas to me. I'm glad because I've had incredible experiences as a teenager in New York City. They would trust me there. I would follow maps and take subways, but I can't imagine I would not be terrified to send a kid like that.
Yeah. You know, the idea that I really like to teach young women in particular is privacy and control. Privacy meaning if you're in an environment where you wouldn't be heard if you yelled out, if you're in an environment that benefits the predator rather than benefits you, and if he has control over you by virtue of the fear of being unpopular or the fear of saying no or resisting or the fear of being hurt, or by virtue of absolute power. If you find yourself in a circumstance where he has privacy and control, doesn't mean he's a bad guy. It might be, he's your driving instructor. He has privacy and control in that situation. But if you also add that with an intuitive feeling of discomfort, then it's super important to get out of that situation.
The 2 times I was held down physically were both I went to a very small high school, and it was like after hours, empty hallway. One of them was a freshman pinned me down on the floor of a empty hallway and I could feel him like rubbing against me and I could not get free. And I screamed, but it was just, boy, that school got empty fast. And another one was the school bully found out I was a vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian since I was 7 years old. And, when you grow up like in farmland, you either are a meat eater or you are not a meat eater because you see where meat comes from.
Yeah.
Like my dad took me to pick out a Thanksgiving turkey because to him it's like fresh meat. And to me it was the end of ever eating meat. But anyway, the high school bully of my grade couldn't get his head around it, that I was a vegetarian. It bothered him. And I don't know why if you're different from someone, it enrages them. And he had his cronies pin me down in the cafeteria. It was empty, maybe after school, something. And he shoved meat, cold cuts and meat down my throat. And it was very violating.
Yeah,
it was really violating. One thing that was interesting in your book is and it's so true, is when men say no, it's a full sentence. And when women say no, it's the beginning of a negotiation.
Have you found that?
Yeah, like when I told you I didn't want to do this, and you were like, come on.
Come on, please.
No, sure, yeah. And I've been persuaded, I've been worn down, for sure.
Right. Yeah, so have I. That lesson is a tough one. Men can do it a lot more easily, I think, because there isn't that concern about being nice or being open. Just in the culture, we're kind of allowed to do it.
Email really helps too. But of course, we're talking about one-on-one interactions. But I have learned to just go, crap, I can't.
Yeah, it's very
Hope
good.
you're well.
And then the negotiation's over.
Right.
Yeah, it's good.
I do feel fear, and I do care what people think of me, and yet I can't not say stuff. I just can't.
Can't help yourself.
Yeah. You know that story, right? The scorpion and the frog. The scorpion says to the frog, can I ride on your back across the river? And the frog goes, what are you kidding? You're going to kill me. You're going to sting me. And he goes, why would I sting you? I'll die. I'll drown if I sting you. And the frog goes, oh yeah. And so he carries the scorpion, and about halfway across the river, the scorpion stings him and he starts to drown. And he goes, what are you doing? I thought, you're going to die now. And the scorpion goes, oh, it's my nature.
That's a really good story for me because a lot of my work is to get people to focus on nature, the way predatory strategies work in nature and the way defensive strategies work in nature, and also to accept the nature of men I don't mean that all men are out of control, violent and aggressive and hostile, but the majority of the hostility and aggression and violence you'll encounter in your life will certainly be from some men. Some men have no effective control over the elements of their nature that are dark, unwanted, offensive, violent, aggressive, domination, all of that. Do you feel as you meet or encounter a man that you need to find out which category he's in?
Yeah. It's funny. I'm a very huggy person and touchy, huggy person, but not with everyone. And
Yeah.
it's funny when some men see that about me. They think that they can hug me and touch me. And, the people I'm hugging and squeezing and touching are people either I've known for a long time or I just have an instant thing with, where there's I sense that I know they're safe.
Yeah. Feels
you know.
comfortable.
Yeah. And, I remember there's a glimmer early on when a guy was like hugging me and I hated it. And I thought, well, I'm a huggy person. It doesn't mean I have to,
Right.
I have to allow everyone to be able to get to hug me, but it's very awkward. It can be very awkward.
The key here is your sovereignty, which is that you make the choice, right? That the woman makes the choice. And the woman makes the choice because men are more naturally the pursuer, more naturally the aggressor. And the woman has to make the choice about whether that's comfortable. And so it's comfortable sometimes and it's not comfortable some other times. And I'm mentioning this because you said you have this fear of drunk people.
Yeah.
It's a very wise fear. I think about young women going away to college and everybody's drinking a lot. And it is a feature in the overwhelming majority of date rapes. Let's say it's you who's drunk. So you lose your ability to respond well, your ability to intuit and understand, your ability to see clearly, your ability to hear clearly, your ability to call out for help clearly. You lose your ability to resist well. And then at the same time, he's losing his ability to intuit what this dynamic really is. Is this okay? She invited me in her car. She took me to her apartment. We go to college together. Is this all right? Seems like it's all right. People want to say, well, the man should not do this. Maybe he should not do this, and he ought to be in trouble. He ought to know better, and he should have learned, and we as a society should teach him. And in the meantime, I have 2 daughters, and I don't burden them with all that. I say, if you've had too much to drink, call me and get home quick. Because there's no politics in that situation, right?
Yeah.
There's
Well,
no...
also, like I guess you could wear ugly, loose-fitting clothes and never drink, but to say, don't have sexuality, don't enjoy yourself the way men can enjoy themselves is, life isn't fair, but I don't think that's any way to live, and it's bullshit.
I agree, but I'll tell you what. So we're going to argue now. Are you
Okay,
ready?
good. I love it.
It ought to be different. It ought to be different. The men ought to behave much better. Men ought to know it. Young men ought to be taught and really take it on board. But they're drinking too. They're drunk too in those circumstances. And they too, you could say they ought to be responsible for everything is fine. But they too lose some of their ability to read the room and to read the circumstance. So I ought to be able to go out, young woman, and walk down the street at 2 a.m. and have no fear. Yes, you ought to. That would be nice. That is not the way it is.
Sure.
I don't know how to find that balance, by the way.
But dressing, being very careful and covering up any part that could be deemed as
provocative.
Sexualized, that's not going to stop rape culture.
You mean, I'll tell you, that's true. I'll tell you
That might protect you from
Well, it
being
might
raped.
not.
It might not, certainly. Listen, when women have to cover, everything but their ankles, their ankles are sexual.
Of course, and there's still rape.
It has to start with retraining boys.
To make a better society, I'm all for that. To make a safer circumstance for the specific young woman that we're talking to, I'm not commenting on her dressing at all, what she wears, but how you go out and have fun.
Travel in packs.
Now we're starting to get to the practical logistics of it. How you do it, what you plan. Do you know any of the people there? Do you have any advantages there? And then I just have no endorsement under any circumstance for being in a vulnerable situation and also being drunk. So you said it, be with a lot of girlfriends, have a circumstance in which you know some of the men who are there and feel comfortable with them. But just going and getting drunk in environments where you have no advantages, that's
No one
the
should
ocean.
do that.
They really shouldn't.
Yeah.
They really shouldn't.
You know, when I moved to New York City, actually, my dad gave me a mace keychain, and I used it once. I was walking on the Bowery, going to meet some friends, and a gaggle of guys walked by me and just started, it was the summer, I was wearing a little t-shirt and shorts, and they just started grabbing me. And I took it out, I squirted it, hit a guy on his chest, not even in his eyes, and they ran. And I remember this rush of like, that's right, yeah, you better run. I just like this like crazy rush of
Adrenaline.
Yeah, but it did it, just having it.
Yeah, so I want to comment on how wise what you just said is, just having it. One of the things that just having any resource does is when you know you have it, you think of it. And when you think of it, it's giving you a signal that there's some reason to think of it. If you follow what I mean, what that really says is, oh, I'm in a situation that I've got to really pay attention and sort of put my head up now and really look around at what's going on.
I did learn a lot of things living in New York, because my favorite thing to do in New York City, and I've had boyfriends over the years that were very angry at me for doing this and loving this, but I love walking at night. I love walking by myself at night. And I feel like I have, knock on wood, a good sense of if the street is really barren and no one's around and it feels iffy, I walk right in the middle of the street. I also have an instant don't fuck with me walk as soon as I feel vulnerable, you know, in an empty street or something. I feel that. And I also, it's funny, I also have a, I have no sexuality side of me when that's,
Valuable. I have to say, men who are likely to rape actually are not looking for sexuality, right? They're looking for vulnerability and domination over someone. But there are plenty of times when that resource that you have will be a great resource to use. And the best example would be when you just don't want somebody to continue their pursuit. It's not even about danger. It's about sovereignty. It's about, do I have a choice in this matter? And I'm going to shut it down. I also want to talk about walking down the street at night. So I have no objection whatsoever to a capable person who has all of her resources walking down the street at night. If you add drunkenness to that situation, super dangerous.
What about headphones?
So I was walking in the park in Santa Monica the other day, and I saw many, many women jogging with headphones. I think it's a huge mistake, because hearing is the number one protective sense. Vision isn't, sight is not, because sight is what I choose to look at, and it's a conscious act, and when I look at that, I'm not looking at that or that or that. But hearing is volumetric. It's all around you. It's the only sense that is. And it tells you that somebody is too close behind you. It tells you that somebody's run up behind you. So listening to music in public and defeating that sense, I think it's a big mistake, particularly when are women doing it the most often? They're doing it when they are jogging in the park alone, because if you're with a girlfriend or a friend or a boyfriend, you're talking and you're engaging and you're not listening to music. So think about an animal in nature. I bring it all back to nature. Would the antelope in Africa that is vulnerable to attack by a lion, you know, cover its ears up or somehow defeat its ability to hear, which is critical? What was that breaking branch? What was that twig? Now, here's the hard part of this message. The hard part is, you mean I should just be allowed to listen to music? You mean I can't just listen to music like everybody else?
Men can have that joy of
That's right.
listening to the soundtrack of their day while they walk. And,
That's right.
I mean, music is everything to me. Like walking the streets of New York with earbuds in is like, it's my number one favorite thing. But in the day and it's busy.
That's right. There's a time and a place where it's all about context, where the circumstances you're walking around in a crowded environment, you know, on the sidewalk in New York, fantastic. I don't love it for the ability to hear a car tire screeching or a car horn or a car engine as you cross the street. It's not my favorite thing, but it's not a violence issue. But the very nature of jogging is that you're moving from environments that change into environments that change. It's not one place. It's not the way it starts. The way it starts is I'm in the crowded part. The way it ends up is I'm near 90th Street, near the reservoir in Central Park, and that isn't as good. My point on all of this is only that people be aware of it. Be conscious about what you're choosing to do. And think about, is this the best place? If it is, have a great time.
You know where I feel vulnerable? Because I'm on the road all the time. hotel gyms
Mm.
because a lot of times they're tiny
And you use the room key to get in, and
and
there's nobody there.
nobody's there.
Yeah, I hear you.
And I think anyone could come in and, I really count on that, hope that there are cameras in there, whatever. I take a look at a weight
what do
where I
cameras
could
do?
grab a
That's
weight.
better. But what do cameras do? Cameras don't do anything.
Well, I mean, if, right, they would know who killed me once I was...
That's what cameras do, because nobody is looking at the monitor with
Right.
their eyes. But the other thing you started to say that I interrupted, pardon me, being conscious of what weight I would pick up, now you're into the practical logistics of protecting yourself, and that's great. And obviously, if somebody walked in, if you don't feel comfortable, you'd take off.
Yeah, I walk to the hotel gym. It's usually a place I've never been. I'm following signs, and I definitely look to see if anyone's seeing me, if anyone's behind me.
Good. Those are all ways to be.
Yeah,
Now,
must
I
be
see,
nice being a guy, huh?
this is a hard reality. I wish it wasn't this way. There's a lot of advantages when it comes to safety, no question. I mean, men have their experience of violence in other ways, but it is not typically an experience of domination. I believe in people being able to have completely free lives, including young women, and it requires that there be an acceptance of the reality in which we live, the reality of being in these bodies, and the reality of being in this society. More guns than human beings, an incredible number of crimes against women, an incredible number of times that women are dominated or treated with violence. And so if you at least acknowledge it, then you go out into the world in that context. It doesn't mean you don't meet people that you like and you don't meet men that you like and you don't have all kinds of experiences. But listening to intuition is really the key. And I have a question for you, which is, how does intuition communicate with you? What do you get that tells you there's something to pay attention to here?
Wow, that's an interesting thing to break down. I get a physical feeling in my gut, if that's a real thing. Yeah, your gut, yeah. I get a physical feeling there, and I feel uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm usually open, and I can feel myself close up.
Right.
Much like, a predator isn't thinking step by step. I'm a predator. I'm looking for someone who will be easy prey. That would entail this, this, and this. It's all stuff they're not thinking cognitively.
All intuitive.
And same with me. Although I've learned from reading your book the pieces of that and the good and the bad of that. So many women are taught to be polite, or they go, oh, I'm being paranoid, or, oh, he asked me for my number. It's so embarrassing because you can't even give a guy a fake number anymore because they're typing it into their phone and calling you. You have to be able to say no.
No. Oh, that's such a good teaching, Sarah. That you just said is so good, because indeed it was a resource before. An option was to give a fake number.
Yeah,
and
then you could still be polite.
But there's nothing rude about no, and it has a really bad rap. I think because when we're kids, we don't want to hear it. But if we think back on the times we heard it, it was about, no, you can't go and do that dangerous thing. No, you can't continue to hit your little sister or brother. No, you can't climb up on the shelves in the living room. They made good sense. They just didn't feel good at the time. So now we grow up. I'll speak as a man, and that word is itself kind of arresting. If somebody says no, you actually stop. Just like you did when you were a kid. And that's a great observation that you're giving. And I think if people practice it in that situation, which is somebody's asking for your number, no, I'd rather not, then they have the resource for when they really need it at some other time.
Someone asked me for my number and I go, nah, I don't do that. And he goes, come on. And then I'm just like, no.
Right. But you're saying that using humor is one of the resources, and I would submit that everybody can do that.
Yeah.
Meaning anybody can do it. It doesn't just
You don't
take
have to be like,
a comedian.
no!
Right. But you can do it in a jokey way, do it in a light way, but hang tight when a person continues to persist. And that's when it gets immediately, to me, when somebody doesn't hear you say no, they are trying to control you.
Then you can go like, oh, double no.
Right. That's right. Those are all good.
You just made me feel so good about my no.
Yeah, that's right. You confirmed my choice. I made the right decision.
How did this come to be that you are this expert on female intuition?
Well, I grew up with all women, so my mother and my two sisters, And I also grew up with a woman who had every possible disadvantage. To be a heroin addict is a big disadvantage.
Your mother?
My mother. And then to be on welfare is a big disadvantage. And so what I saw is that society, as little as it cares about a single mother with 3 kids, it cares even less about a single mother with 3 kids on welfare, and it cares even less about a single mother with 3 kids on welfare and who's a heroin addict. So I saw clearly what it was to be a completely disempowered person. And then I saw and grew up with my sisters, and I was the dad, even though I was 5 years old and then 10 years old, and I was the protector in that family. And I got a profound respect for the situation that women are in, but also a profound respect for the options that were available to us nonetheless. We lived in dangerous situations with a lot of rough people coming around and with a lot of situations going on with guns and with drama, and yet we prevailed. And we didn't all get through it alive because my mother didn't, but the 3 kids, we all did. And so I have also a healthy respect for what it's like to live in a frightening situation. And ultimately, my own fear mechanism was broken, just completely broken. I would not be afraid. I got to a place where I would not register fear of anything. Right? I had seen somebody shoot somebody. I had seen guns go off in the house. I had seen all variety of violence and had been a recipient of all variety of violence. What that gave me, that has been hugely important to me, and right on your question, is it gave me a really strong empathy for people who are afraid and for people who are victimized violently. I was basically like a battered woman in a relationship. And because you are that if you're a kid, same dynamic, right? Leaving was not even remotely on the agenda, just like it isn't for so many women who are in violent situations with who? Their husband, and they got their kids, and they've got their pets, and this is where they live, and this is where they work. How do you undo all this? How do you just walk out of this? And I, by the blessings of the experience that I had, I relate to all of that. I really relate to the experience. That's a long answer to the question of how it happened.
It was so boring.
Thank you very much.
No, I'm just, I'm no expert, but it seems like it's hard to recognize an emergency situation sometimes because there's no slow motion. There's no music telling us this is about to get serious. It's not a movie. It's just one moment and the next moment and the next moment and the next moment.
And in situations with battered women, it's doubly hard to recognize because their fear mechanism, like mine as a kid, has been slowly eroded by this violent incident and this violent incident. I hope that while it's hard to talk about, the idea that young women in this culture will benefit from understanding this subject, because the subject is burdensome, like who wants to have this subject? I hope that just acknowledging reality and learning reality lets you go about your life, live your life, and you do everything the way you want to do it, but you remember that I'm going to be thoughtful about how I get home from this thing. I'm going to be thoughtful about who's going to be there. And to me, when the politics enters and says, as you said, well, men should learn to not be this way.
Yeah, well, that's the big picture.
That's right.
That's the big picture.
Yes, they should. But the specific picture is women need, that book of mine is a book about personal responsibility. Not blaming victims afterwards, but personal responsibility, which is, I have choices. I have so many choices when I'm getting ready to go to that party tonight. I have so many choices when I'm at the party in the beginning before I've had too much to drink.
Well,
It's hard to take, I know.
It's a jagged pill to swallow because a lot of very well-meaning men saying, or people saying, you have a daughter, or I have a daughter, I have a mother, how about you're a human being on this earth with other human beings, some more vulnerable than you, and we should be taking care of each other.
Well, listen, I think we can.
Do you need a daughter to have compassion for the plight of a woman and not being physically stronger than men, being someone that can be overpowered?
These are great questions. There is a very big teacher in that situation it is another great opportunity to look at reality. That's the culture that we live in. And even that phrase, rape culture, I don't actually like the phrase rape culture because there has never—
I love it.
No,
I'm
there
going
has,
to name my firstborn that.
and so you may, but there has never been a time that women didn't live in a rape culture. It never wasn't that way. We're the closest, by the way. There are better laws. There's better access to law enforcement. Cops don't come now and say, well, he's your boyfriend, and so it doesn't really count. And there's better education. We're the closest. But what we're not changing is human nature.
Right. But when you find that huge universities are covering up date rape and rape so that their numbers are good, that's not okay.
Your pointing it out brings us back to the only place that I can encourage people to stand, which is reality. So how it should be, how it could be, how it used to be, how it ought to be, how it might one day be, that is all nice talk. But when it comes to tissue damage, when it comes to being dominated or being raped or being assaulted, you go with reality. What is the reality? Can we make it better? Yes. Are we making it better, even on college campuses? Yes. Is it done? Is it over? Is the work done? Of course not. Of course not.
Right.
And throughout human history, rape and other forms of domination have existed, and they still do, alive and well in the United States.
You can't say, I'm not going to be aware because I shouldn't have to be.
That's what people do. Reality, reality, reality. That's the key. Politics is a different thing.
Right.
And no politician is going to be with my college-age daughter in a dorm. No politician is going to have anything to do with coming to their rescue at any time. And no policeman will be there either, right? It's about empowering people to understand what are the pre-incident indicators of violence, and am I seeing them right now? And if I am, I want to get out of this situation. I want to start using my advantages.
I have a question that might switch gears, but I just suddenly...
Anything.
Reading your book, that first story, Kelly, so she's carrying groceries, her cat food spills out. She had noticed the door was unlocked when she walked in. The guy says, I've got it, and says, let me help you with those groceries. She says no, which of course is a negotiation when it comes from a woman. What should she have done? I mean, she acquiesced and said, okay, you can carry my bags. She acquiesced and said, okay, you can take them inside the apartment. But in that situation where there is no one around, he could have gone into domination mode just earlier. I mean, if she said, no, I don't want you to help me, no.
Oh, so if she did that—
He still might not leave, I mean.
Oh, if she did that, you said earlier that predators also have an intuitive process of identifying a victim. And if she says that, odds are overwhelmingly likely that he says two things. Not my victim, first of all. And also that conversation happens out in an environment where he does not have privacy and control, because any one of those apartment doors can open up. Now, what I don't do is judge people after the fact for what they, quote, should have done, because she did a great job. She saved her own life. And that guy was not just somebody engaging in rape. That was also somebody who killed some of his victims. And so she did a fantastic job, and I have nothing but admiration and praise for her listening to her intuition in the way that she did. But if, in fact, a woman in a situation in an apartment corridor says a very strong no, she removes all of his persuasive options. You can't persuade somebody who does what you did here when you said no. No. There's no sorry, by the way, because I saw your eye. Right? It wasn't that bad. But anyway, there is no persuading somebody in that circumstance. When you overreact, call that an overreaction, right? It's over, because you've removed all the options. And it is a very powerful word when delivered really strong. So you said, could Kelly have said, no, I didn't ask for your help, I don't want your help, no. Leave this building, any of those things, and be an unmanageable wild animal?
It sounds, of course, if that's what she should do. It's so hard to get to that place.
Too. It's so rare. You basically have to bring it up and make it big and broad and really, really clear. It's different from, no, I'd really rather not. Right? That's what women typically do, is try to find a way that won't offend. And I say to you, who's the master of offending, I'm not making a joke. You've offended a lot of people, and you've been willing to do it and been brave enough to do it. I'm not talking about politically offending people. I'm talking about in a room when you say a great, fucking joke, some of the people think, ay, ay, ay. So, and that's what makes the audience go, whoa, and really react, right? You're great at that. So I would take that and say, let's give that to other women, have no concern over what, you're making the guy feel bad?
It's very interesting because you have an interest in female comedians. And I mean,
How
you
did
do.
you know that? Did I ask you out? You're the one who said no.
I said no. No, I mean, you
Oh, I do.
You've
I
always
do.
said that you find them, strong and truth tellers, But an ironic thing that I can tell you, and I don't know if you're aware of this, is that many female comedians find themselves in abusive relationships because we often are looking for a manly man. In my own life, a lot of the relationships I was in the first half of my adult life was with men where I played a very submissive role. And
Because you're playing a strong role out in the rest of the world.
yeah, there is this kind of seeking of someone strong enough to be able to handle you and a desire to be almost submissive in relationship. So that's an odd common thread in women comics who I know you see as so strong.
I hear
But
you.
there's another side to that coin.
The whole world of sexuality and the dynamic between men and women is enormously complicated, and there is an attraction. Even in nature, in the animal world, there's a very interesting thing that happens with bonobo apes, which is the ape who kills the baby of a female. Who do you think that female wants to mate with? Him. And the reason is, I'll be safe with him, because I'm not safe if I'm not with him. So it's kind of goes to the idea that you see some women where their attraction is to rough, angry, dominating men, and it's a part of human nature. And I hear you, and thank you for telling me, and I encourage you, to really take on board what I'm saying about the female comedians and their role as truth tellers. I don't like any form of political correctness when it begins to squeeze out content, because the very nature of comedy is go everywhere.
Right. People go, oh, you shouldn't do a joke about rape. You shouldn't do a joke about the Holocaust. But I do think that a comedian's job, well, Mr. Rogers says if it's mentionable, it's manageable. And my therapist talks about noticing, just an existence of noticing.
Yeah.
And
Which is
together,
the opposite of denial, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right. Denial is, there's that Holocaust over there and all the pain that still exists from it, but we're just going to not say the word. We're just going to not talk about it.
And that's how it repeats again. But if it's out in the light, I mean, it feels scarier, but it's got to be good, right? Because
absolutely,
then we are forced to deal with it.
All healing comes from the light. In talking about the things that happened to you in your life, all of those things need to be healed from. And you've obviously done a lot of that healing work. And to me, the definition of healing is using all of your energy in the present moment and using none of your energy to manage the past. I want to ask you about that. What were your healing strategies to get through a bunch of these dramas?
A lot of therapy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always surprised by how unwilling people are, not just to go to therapy, but to seek the right fit of a therapist. People will drive 15 different cars before they decide on a stupid freaking car.
Right.
Make a few appointments. There are a lot of crappy therapists. Find the one that's right for you. Anyway, that's not what this is about, but I found
it
a
is
great
what this
one.
is about. That's
good.
advice. It's advice for people. A lot of readers of Gift of Fear are reading it because they had a profound victimization experience. And in their healing, that is part of it, learning about what happened, learning about what the resources are, learning that women are enormously powerful, right? You have all these defenses, including physical defenses. So that's a big part of healing.
Right. I mean, there were things I didn't remember until I read your book that were existing inside me. When you flip out about something, another thing I learned in therapy, if it's hysterical, it's historical, right?
If you have a big reaction, there's a reason.
So there are things, seemingly small things that you might have a huge reaction to. That's when you have to look inside and go, oh, this comes from something. therapy and awareness, and any new thing I learn has kind of informed the growth in my own life and understanding, or even remembering for the first time, or acknowledging for the first time things that have happened to me. And it's healing, right? Yeah.
Bringing light to it. Sarah, to have this conversation with you is a big deal to me. Thank you so much, first of all, for being you and being one of the women who models how to say no, who models how to say what you feel, who models how to be authentic, and who has courage and models it. I know you don't have it all the time in every situation.
It's a practice, right?
Yeah, it's a practice. And I am super grateful that you took the time to talk about this today.
Thank you. I can say the same for you. I'm so honored to be talking to you.
Thank you for everything.